Hello, everybody. It's June 25th, and this is Show and Tell. I have not made any new intro music yet, so that's what it is. Look at this fancy graphic I just coughed up this morning. So, today I have a new guest. It is my good friend Haig Armen, who, as you can see from the background, has a slight interest in music. So, hey, why don't you introduce yourself to the 8 people that are maybe going to watch this?
Hi, everyone. And thanks, Morten, for having me. This is going to be super fun. Yes, I do have an interest in music. And if you want a theme for your little intro, I can make you one easily. Maybe we can do it today, actually. Lots of ways that we can start making things. So I'm a professor at Emily Carr. I teach interaction design and have slowly over time built this program with my colleague Eugenia Bertulis, and it's been an amazing ride. And we're now seems like every year it's expanding. We're hiring more professors to teach it. So it's clearly an area of both expansion and interest. And personally, I've been a musician my whole life since I was, I think, 14, and design kind of crept in and took over what was originally a music career. I used to tour professionally, and then I think it was just about 2 years ago I had my guitar with me, and Eugenia and I were doing a workshop, and she's like, "Why don't you play for the students?" And I was like, "Really? It's a design class." And so we started talking about how people interact with instruments, and that turned into this whole large area that I started exploring over the last 2 years. And yeah, I have a lot to talk about. Probably the first thing we could talk about is what is the relevance to interaction design or design in general?
That would be interesting. I mean, it seems somehow both obvious and not so obvious. So.
Yeah, there's an obvious part to it. Like every instrument you see has to be designed. But as I'm just anticipating, a lot of people when they think of design, they're like, yeah, the paint, the color, the way it looks, the pick guard, all of this stuff. And that's not normally the hard part of design. That's the easiest part of design, is that the styling that fits over it. But really, when you kind of zoom in on the interaction part of how people interact with pianos, keyboards, drums, all of those things, there's a lot of nuances in how they're designed that have taken many, many decades to get right. And it takes a musician trying a new instrument to tell you there's lots of failures in this area.
And I was going to at one point teach one of my friends how to play guitar, because I'm also a guitarist. I have a wall of guitars over there. It's just over there. And I was explaining to her the difference between an acoustic guitar and a classic guitar and an electric guitar, and why they are playably different, and
yeah,
how to find the right one, and then short scale and long scale, and all these things, and how every time I switch, I have to really think through, what am I doing here? Because everything is different, and there's so much motor memory that's attached to specific frets and specific lengths.
Exactly.
So there is a lot of interaction in music that is not so obvious.
So I'm going to bring up I have a few slides of some examples that I like showing.
You prepared?
A little bit. Although I didn't have the time to actually run my keynote, so give me a second.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you a story. Last year, I went to the Ableton conference, Ableton Live conference called Loop, not Link. This guy came to me because he saw I was carrying a guitar around, and he's like, "I've got a new product. I really want you to try it. Let's go have lunch. You can try it." And I don't want to badmouth him, because so I won't mention who they are, but it's more of a larger observation of where interaction design or UX could really, really help this area of instrument design. So this guy came to me with what looked like a really cool product. It was a travel guitar that basically folded in half so you can put it in your backpack. And that's made for me. I totally travel everywhere I go with a guitar with me. Like I'm used to have like a travel case. I do carry on. Like I don't go anywhere without my guitar because it's how I wake up and it's how I go to sleep at night. It's my way of like setting myself straight. Anyway, so this guy is like really anxious to have me try his instrument, and it's beautiful looking, and ergonomically it seems like it fits the way you'd hold a guitar. It does both MIDI and it does like you can hear it as like an electric guitar. You can hear, and a pickup so you could plug it into an amp. But I started playing it and I was just like, all of a sudden I looked at it and I was like, what is going on here? And it was the most simple thing, which was the strings on the neck and the strings on the bridge were two different sets of strings.
Oh.
Because they were basically, it was a hinge, so it could fold.
Yeah,
so it had two separate strings. So this is hard to explain to people that don't play guitar, but you get what I'm talking about, Morten.
Yeah.
When you pick here, you feel it on your fret side, and if you don't feel it, then something's wrong. There's a disconnection going on. It's sort of the opposite of piano, where you're building independence between the two hands. With guitar, it's about synchronization and the timing between when you pick and when you fret. So that is so key that someone that has been playing, I've been playing for 35 years, and that felt so foreign. He's like, just play for a little while and it'll go away. And I was like, I'm trying to play a C major scale. And I was just like, this is not working.
Well, it would feel like you're not playing because you're strumming and then nothing is happening in your fret hand, right? At all.
Have you ever, like I do this with my daughter, is I'll play the frets and she'll do the strumming. Yeah. And it felt like that, like two different people playing one instrument.
Yeah, and there would be something off about the action in the strings too, because the strings are shorter than normal because they're not, like they don't go all the way down to the bridge, right?
Right. So I asked him, like, how much is this thing tested? And he's like, well, you know, it's mostly the technology that we tested, not the playability. And I was like, well, because to me, that's like a huge, like, it's the way I would make my decision. I wanted to buy it. I was ready to buy it until I played it. And then I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do this. Like, it's not playable to me. Yeah. And everything else they got right. Like the way that it becomes compact and all of that was great. But the way that I try to describe this is the characteristic is tangibility. Like the tangibility of the instrument wasn't there in the way that guitar players are expecting it to be there.
And that's also one of the key components in interaction design, right? That you get in, I forget the terminology right now, but that when you do something, you should get appropriate feedback for it. So when you click a button, you should feel that you're clicking the button. It shouldn't just be, and that's why on your phone, when you click on a button, there's a slight vibration to tell you tactically that there is something happening here. And when that goes away, you're like, am I doing this?
Yeah. So the technical term for that is direct manipulation.
Yeah.
That's the term they use in interaction design. And it's the thing that makes it hard for some people to use a mouse for the first time, because like a touch screen is really intuitive because what you want to move, you point at it and you move it. But on a mouse, you move something that's in a different place, and you have to kind of map that visually in your head. Like, okay, when I move the mouse this way, that's going to move across the screen. That it's not as direct a manipulation.
Yeah,
but it's a lot more direct than like hitting an arrow key to move something, for example. So you quickly get into the nuances of interactions, both physical, conceptual, and
good practice, like
cognitive.
the fact that you need to do user testing with the actual user.
Yeah, and so I've gone back and started reading books about people that make instruments, and all the good instrument makers, everyone from like Antonio Stradivarius, a famous, violin maker of the 16th century, all the way up until like Bob Moog, who designed the most, famous synthesizer. They all did user testing. It wasn't called, obviously, user testing when they were doing it, but they were like, they'd give the instrument to their friend and they'd watch as the person would play. And like Bob Moog has some great stories about how he had things like the pitch wheel that changed the pitch of. So he had it in different places, and people would have to like lean across their keyboard to get to it, and so just the placement of where that was really changed the playability of the instrument. So playability, tangibility, these are things that are kind of more the obvious overarching aspects of instruments that make them better or worse. And then I would add a few more things. So I've got a great little, my wife calls them toys, but I call them tools. So this is called a Rolly light block, and it's this amazing device. I wish you could feel this. My kids will play with this for hours because it's got a thick silicone layer that has lights underneath it. It's pressure sensitive, very squishy, feels almost like skin, and it's really, really tangible. In other words, this wirelessly connects to either a phone or your laptop. You can connect it to your music gear and use it as a MIDI controller. So people use it as a drum machine. They use it like to make slides. It's a really expressive little instrument, and it's got these really strong magnets along every edge, so you can like modularize your instrument, build it out. Like people have like 10 of these like linked together. So Rolly's doing some really interesting things with the combination of technology and material. ROLI, Rolly, they're a British company. So there's my first example of like something that's really tangible. So these are like a shopping list of like when I'm working on an instrument workshop with my students, I'll go over some of the key things that I think are really important. Tangibility is like top of the list for most people, and even some people when they hear me talk about the tangibility of an instrument, they go, "Oh, you're kind of old school. You play guitar, like." You're dad rock, right? And I'm like, no. I use Ableton. I've used synthesizers my whole life. I'm also tech nerd, so I'm really into trying the latest things. So don't get me wrong. I'm not like let's just build old violins. That's not where I'm going here. I think there's a huge opportunity because there's so much amazing new technology now that is not applied to instruments. So there's an opportunity, but it also needs to be done right. What's happening right now is the people that are good at the technology are making instruments, but they're not good instrument makers. So there's a disconnection there.
Do you think, just before you dive into all your crazy electronic stuff, do you think the reason why musicians aren't there seems to be a barrier to musicians going in and trying completely new things? And I always wonder, is that because instruments have always almost become sacred? You have these like perfect, the guitar, everyone keeps redesigning the guitar, but it's still the same thing. Everything is the same, it just has a slightly different shape. Or the piano is always the same, or it almost feels like there's this, we've gotten to the perfect version of this, so we can't do anything new.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. There is something in our minds about those things, instruments, that it is quite different than the way you think about your laptop. And maybe your laptop's an exception, but most devices, most people think of them as devices. But I don't think of those things hanging on my wall as devices. A lot of people name their instruments. Like, there's a different relationship with your instrument than almost any other thing you own, because you use it every day. There's this intimate connection to it that if it's not intimate, it's that you're going to go and find another instrument that connects to you more. So so you're absolutely right that it's more than just like getting the usability and the functionality part right. It's got to speak to you in many, many different levels. That's what makes it a really interesting interaction design problem, because there's everything from the ergonomics of it to like the piano is this amazing learnable instrument, right? Like, your son has probably walked up to a piano and gone, I can make sound with this. I can make music. Like, immediately you can figure it out how it works. But you can't say that about all instruments, right?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. We have I have guitars everywhere. My wife has a grand piano just right outside my office, and my son will come. My son is almost 4, so he'll come sometimes downstairs and he'll be like, "Is it okay if I play music?" And I never know if that means play music as in like play music they can listen to, or if it means that he's going to sit there and just destroy the piano. But he has this, I remember when I was a child and I played the piano, it was when I was small, I would just mash keys like this and then make noise because I really like noise. He will sit there and be like, dong, dong, dong. And you can see he's like, oh, some of these things sound good together and some of them don't. And I can just see his brain trying to understand this isn't just noise.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to watch.
So that's, I'm not sure, maybe you can help me figure out what the terminology is for this, but there is something that makes a device approachable. And and I guess maybe on the very technical side, you might call that accessibility, as in it's learnable. Like I said, the piano, you walk up to it, you see there's keys, you press on a key and sound happens. You're like, oh, interesting. Press down, get a sound. Over here to the right, if I play a key, it's a higher tone than the one to the left. Okay, so my mental model is getting more sophisticated. I know that as I go to the right of the keyboard, I'm going higher in sound, and vice versa, to the left, lower in sound. So you very quickly figure out pitch because it's mapped out for you. And then secondly, you press harder, you get a louder sound. You're like, oh, that's easy. I press hard, louder. Press quietly or gently, and I get a so you're starting to build some nuanced kind of ideas of interaction very quickly with a piano. And so that kind of approachability, or I don't know, approachability.
There are heuristics built into it, right? It's like you always talk about heuristic evaluation and seeing if people are able to rationalize themselves through a user experience to figure out how it works. And when you look at something like specifically a keyboard where all you need is the ability to put weight on something, and the fact that it displays itself as a bunch of things that look the same, but they're in a row and order. And then if you go in one direction, you go in one direction. And if you go, like, there's so many pieces to that are just obvious to anyone who has access to it. Just fascinating.
It is, yeah.
As about your trumpet, where you have 3 keys.
Right.
And you're like, how do you make all
how does Miles Davis do that with 3 keys? Right. Yeah, he holds down some only part way. Like, there's all these like amazing nuances that once you've spent years and years on an instrument, you can start doing these ghost notes and blue notes and things that are like in between the 2 notes of a piano, right? What was I going to say about that too? So I think there was a time in interaction design that people were going, oh, you need to make an intuitive interface. And like, the interface isn't the thing that's intuitive. So we're kind of talking about that, right? Like, how do you make it so it becomes intuitive for people to use, that approachability? And that's it seems easy, but it's not easy at all, because we all have such different mental models. Like, what does music look like in our head? What does playing music look like? I mean, we both play guitar, Martin, but I'm sure in our heads, visually the way music looks is very different.
Yeah, I've tried to draw music sometimes for people, and they think I'm crazy.
We got to do that one day. That'll be fun.
So you're actually trying to make instruments?
Yes. So I'll show you how I'm getting there. It's really piece by piece. So I want to talk about another aspect. So I talked about the tangibility. I talked about the accessibility or approachability. And then lastly, this one's the one that maybe people might disagree with. And this is maybe where I might feel like I'm kind of old school, but you tell me. Music is a social act. So usually you do it with other people. You play music with other people. And at the very least, hopefully you have an audience. Like there's that social aspect of you're communicating your expression, your emotion through sound. And so I want to bring to you another example of a really simple instrument. This is called a pocket operator.
Oh, yeah. I've seen this.
It's made by a Swedish company called Teenage Engineering. Yeah. They're awesome company. Everything they put out, they knock out of the park. These things sell for about $50 American, and they can't make them fast enough. They're so amazingly always sold out. And it looks like a calculator, old school calculator. And so it's not very loud one. Give me a sec, I'll turn it up. So this one's a drum machine one. So I can build beats out. I can program a pattern. It's all like, once you start using it, it's really amazingly easy. Like my 10-year-old daughter, she started making beats on this in a second. There's a few, hold on.
I need like pause music for this.
So I have more of them.
Yeah.
I'm collecting them. This one's a Bassline Generator. And it has, so they have
a link system, right? So you can connect them to each other.
What I was getting to. Yeah. So these things run for months and months on 2 AAA batteries. I don't know how they're able to do it. I don't even know where the speaker is on this thing, but it makes sound. But it also has an input and an output. Like literally, like, do you see a speaker anywhere on this thing? It's thin as a board, and the only thing that gives it thickness is the screen, the monochromatic screen. And it's basically just like very, very tangible buttons and a bunch of lights on it. Beautifully engineered. And when you read articles about the lead designer of this, he's like, kind of has this anti-design ethos. Like he's like, don't design it, just make it work. Well, but I disagree.
The thing you're holding is very
beautiful. And they have a really clear aesthetic, like it's show the technology. Anyway, to get to what you're talking about, I was talking about the social aspect of instruments. And one of the things that make using things like this in a collaborative way difficult is they have their own clock. Mm-hmm. So they will just, you hit play and it goes by itself. Imagine if you were at a campfire and there was 2 other people with guitars and we're like, we're all going to play a song. So you go, okay, let's do that. So one guy starts playing and ignores everybody else and just plays at his own tempo. Actually, I've been in those situations. Yeah, me too. But that's what these would be like if they ignored all the other instruments around them. But Teenage Engineering was smart enough to go, oh, so the fundamental thing about playing together is synchronization. So they made a really simple, you just use one of these stereo jacks. It goes from one to the other. You tell it, I'm now linking to another, and then they all basically daisy chain together. So they all synchronize together, and you can get it to do that with your digital audio workstation, whether you use Logic or GarageBand or Ableton. It will synchronize with those. I use these things all the time. I try to even walk around with them because like they're small enough you can kind of put it in your pocket. They don't call it pocket operator for nothing. But it's a great, like there's lots of apps that help you take down ideas. But having an actual thing that you can put down, like a beat that you have in your head, or a bass line or a melody, like having something that you can then bring it into your workstation and manipulate it to turn into the actual idea. That's really powerful.
Yeah. You're reminding me that I'm supposed to be buying these. It's on my long list of things that I should buy that my wife will object to.
I just bought another one. I have like 6 now. They have a sampling one, so it comes with a microphone. You can be like boop, and then make boop boop boop, like totally make a beat with sounds. Me and my daughter have been having fun with that one.
Well, it's cheaper than their OP1, right? The keyboard that costs.
Yeah, that's probably their most famous product. Is this beautiful little? It's also mobile. Like it's small. It's almost toy-like, but it sounds amazing. When I saw Reggie Watts doing a stand-up, and he had one with him, just like. I was just like, I want one of those, but they're pricey, like not to the point where I think I know lots of people that have them. If I want to use one, I'll be like pulling favors to borrow one. Another great instrument, yeah. So those 3 things: tangibility, accessibility, and this kind of collaborative way of using instruments. I'm realizing that there's some newer technological, let's say tech-based or tech-driven instruments that forget about the social aspect of it. It's really about a guy in a dark basement making dark beats, which is a thing. It's good, but did I just describe you?
Yes. Well,
sure
this basement is very bright.
Everyone from like Deadmau5 all the way across. Yeah, so there's a lot. Even if you ask students to design an instrument, they might be able to like sketch out something, but that's all just kind of hearsay until you are able to test that idea. And to be able to test out an idea, obviously you know this, Martin, you got to prototype it, you got to put it in front of people. So what is the bare minimum prototype to get to test some of these ideas? And so I started by like trying to get our students at Emily Carr to like build little instruments with, oh, did I just?
I'm switching. There we go.
Oh, great. So this thing is called a Little Bits kit. So this is a kit. It's designed by but both Little Bits and Korg, who, Korg's a famous electronic music manufacturer. And these are basically the way I describe them is it's electronic Lego. Like it's what Lego should have done probably about 2 decades ago. And basically these things clip together. They're color coded. They have like rare earth magnets between them that connect them electronically. And when I like turn this on, so you get an idea. You can really play. So you can mix and match different pieces. Right now I have this. The first one is a little sequencer. It just plays 4 notes it over and over again in a loop, and you can like specify what notes those are. And the next thing is called an oscillator, which is basically the thing that generates a wave, like a sound wave. And then the last one is a delay, which basically takes that sound wave and multiplies it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're hearing, let me just turn it back up again. And I'm going to turn the delay off so you can just hear the single note.
Right.
So that's just it playing one note. I can change the pitch of it with the oscillator. Then if I add delay, anyway, I could play with these for hours.
Well, that's for people who don't.
You can do a lot with this. Like this is only 1, 2, 3, 3 components, and you've got like the basis of a synthesizer. And then if you add, there's like all kinds of controllers. Like, do I have any with me? Like flexible bits that if you bend them, it bends the note. All kinds of other ways that you can interact with these things. So this is a really good starting point. But I want to bring to you this idea that programming isn't just like coding, as in JavaScript or C++ or whatever. That the way that you sequence these components is programming. Yeah. And I didn't really clue into that until I started building some of my own pedals. And so I want to show you, I also want to make a time check. Like how much time do we have? Because I've got so much. There's no time
check. Whatever.
I love hearing that. So during this whole lockdown period, I started buying little pieces and looking at online forums of how people are building pedals. I've always wanted to know how people build pedals. And if you're not sure what a pedal is, a pedal for guitar players is like lots of people go crazy buying pedals. I've now, since the lockdown, Morton, I don't know, this is like a guilty pleasure of mine. I've probably built 12 pedals now, like quite a few. Everything from, like, I'll show you some of them. I started with distortion pedals. So just taking like an aluminum box, inside there's a circuit board. And so you learn the sequence, you look at the schematics of how these are built. And this is a more complex one. There's probably like 50 components on this little guy. And this is basically an emulation or a clone of a MXR Distortion Plus, a very famous distortion pedal that like everyone from Randy Rhoads to you name it. There's a lot of people have used this one. Another famous pedal is the Ibanez Tube Screamer, another famous overdrive pedal. So I built my own version of that called Tubology. And then I started going a little crazy building and designing these pedals. This one is called, I call it a clonology. There's a very famous overdrive pedal that was only handmade in the early 90s called the Klon Centaur. And it's a very, very famous pedal. Like Jeff Beck plays it. A lot of really famous people play these things. And I've always like, they have like mythical status at this point. They probably, you could find them on eBay for like $3,000 or $4,000. A pedal that originally would have cost $300.
Right.
So I'm like, I really want to hear what those things sound like. I've never even seen one. So I built a clone because there's a whole bunch of people online. There's a whole DIY stomp box community, like massive amounts of people that just share schematics and build like this sounds so good. I I'm so proud. Like I've thrown away all of my own overdrive pedals because I just use this now. So that, I mean, it's a bit moving a little bit away from instrument building, but there's a part of it that was, I wanted to really understand how these pieces come together. Yeah. So in the same way that when you look down at the little bits thing, the way that it's programmed, imagine each one of these components does something to the signal as it goes through it. So just understanding how electricity flows through this thing and how it changes has starting with really basic ones and then working my way up has been an amazing way of learning about this stuff. And and you know this as a teacher, Martin, is that you have to give people like the carrot on the end of the stick, just going like, learn about electronics. It's worthwhile. Like that's not going to make me do it.
You can build amazing things with electronics. Go do it.
Right? But it's a bit of a long haul. So you start with like really simple. I have a few really simple old distortion pedals that like have 8 components in them, but it's a good little distortion pedal. And that I made within an afternoon, and I was like, I can do this. I didn't get electrocuted. I'm fine. I made a distortion pedal. So it's that like taking those baby steps that gets you to this point where you're like, wow, I can really build some cool things. So I wanna show like moving away from the pedals thing. Unless you have any questions about that.
No, well, I was just going to say, do people watching this who are like, what is this pedal thing? Just to give you an idea, whenever you hear a musician, a guitarist or a bass player or something play music, and then all of a sudden the sound of their instrument changes, it's because they have an effects pedal that literally sits, like there's a cable coming out of the guitar or instrument that goes into a pedal, and then you stomp on it like with your foot as what's called a stomp box or pedal, and it turns it on, and then you destroy the signal in some way, and then it gets sent over to the amplifier. And there's an entire science in chaining them and figuring out like where in the chain should the different effects sit. And you build these boards where you can make different sequences and channel the signal in different ways. And there are people who just do that. Like one of my abandoned careers was a guitar tech, and I was doing a lot of that where I would design these effects boards to figure out how to wire the pieces together to create certain sounds. And if you go look on YouTube or something, you can find a documentary about the guy who designs the sounds for David Gilmour, the guitarist in Pink Floyd, where not only is there effects pedals, but he uses combinations of effects cabinets and microphones and built these completely crazy setups to get these particular sounds. And now you can buy like a desktop speaker that has all this stuff built in, but there's something missing, and it's very hard to explain what it is. There's like a quality that's missing in the real effects. So even though you can buy these racks or boxes or amps that do all the work, you will still see professional musicians go out and buy the stomp boxes and wire them together, because there's just something that happens in the electronics and just the signals when they get corrupted as they go through all this stuff that cannot be emulated in a digital box.
Yeah. I always was like, what is it that makes the difference between, because I've played with all those like simulations, the software stuff, and it's getting very, very sophisticated. But I'm with you, like there's always this, like, it's not quite there. It's not the way that and then, so how do I connect those things like the pedal world and what I was talking about with instruments? Mm-hmm. To most people, those might seem like two really different worlds. But if you think about your instrument, not just as the thing that you're playing, but the whole chain of how it goes from your fingers to like it coming out of a speaker somewhere, or going to someone listening to it with earbuds or whatever, that mm-hmm. there's a lot of things along that chain that change the sound entirely. It's like some people hate their music in MP3 format. A lot of, if you listen to people that master music, like the high end people that finish the music at the very end as it's just about to be released. They hate MP3 because it squishes the music down and crushes the sound, and you lose the dynamics of the sound. A whole bunch of frequencies are just completely ignored and thrown away. So if you have really attuned ears, you start noticing all those things. And like Dave Gilmour really cares a lot about his tone. So he thinks about every little piece along that chain, and those pedals are, I'm sure in his mind, like they are in my mind, they're part of your instrument. Like that, ever since I played electric guitar, the pedals that I chose really, really alter the sound of not only the sound, but how you play.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's part of your instrument. And I know that's hard maybe for some people that don't play instruments to make those connections, but that it's definitely true.
Yeah, there's a reason why you have all those different guitars behind you, and there's a reason why I have all these different guitars on my wall too. That there's certain things that, like, there's moods and sounds and qualities in each instrument.
That's right.
That need to be captured to get that perfect sound, and you have the whole chain becomes part of the sound, which is why you have like websites that just break down the gear of musicians to see how it works. And I mean, I used to play flute, and it was the same. I had a flute, and I wasn't happy with the sound, so I got a different one. And it had, like, the head of the flute was silver. The whole head was silver, and it made a much brighter sound. But then there were certain things I was playing where that brightness was just way too much. So I had to take the head off and put on that shitty head from the other flute.
Interesting.
Take the brightness away for those particular songs because it sounded wrong. And it wasn't like, you're playing in an orchestra with like 40 people. And I can hear the flute way better than anyone else because I'm playing it. But it drove me crazy that there was this particular couple of songs. I forget what it was. It was some Russian music where the brightness just did not work with the tonality of the entire music. Like, you can feel what the music is the shape of the music is a certain way. And this brightness made these sharp edges that shouldn't be there. And that's what I feel like when I'm playing guitar. I'm like, no, this doesn't work with my Gibson. I need to switch to a Fender guitar because there's just something in the quality that doesn't mesh with what I'm doing.
Yeah, Martin, that reminds me of there's a famous story. Do you know who James Jamerson is? James Jamerson is like one of the most famous bass players of all time.
Right.
But nobody knows who he is because he played on all the Motown records that credit the musicians. But any musician, a bass player, will tell you, like, James Jamerson is like the most amazing in the pocket bass player there was. And he always liked the sound of dead strings because and he would take like a Fender Precision bass and he would jam, like, right between the bridge and the first pickup. He would jam a sock in there. Like, he would just take
just like completely deaden the song.
And it would just like basically sound more like an upright bass.
Yeah.
Like, it would deaden the sound. And like, when you hear him play, like, he's got this kind of really nice bouncy staccato style, and you're like, how does he do that? And it's a sock. Like, it's just, there's nothing about it. He just jammed a sock in it.
Yeah, it's the custom stuff, right? You become attuned to a specific thing that you want to achieve. Yeah,
that's right. So I want to talk about, like, where I'm at with the kind of research with musical instruments what a lot of professors do is, like, they'll design a workshop to try to get all of this stuff into a small a course that's kind of intense and small. And while I was on my sabbatical, I was traveling around Europe, and I did what I'm calling sonic interactions, a workshop. I did it in I think about 7 different places, like five universities, and 2 other, like I taught teenagers in Armenia how to make instruments. And so I had to design this workshop, and I took a Raspberry Pi, which I'll grab one for you. So if you don't know what a Raspberry Pi is, it's a very popular prototyping board. It's basically a Linux computer. So I would say it's maybe a step up from an Arduino. An Arduino is another prototyping board, which I have somewhere around. But Arduinos are really, really common, and I tried using them. They are being used for making musical instruments, but they didn't quite have the level of programmability, or that you would have to learn a lot about coding to be able to get to the functionality that I was hoping for. So instead, I went to this Raspberry Pi, and I built a little operating system that had a few little key components that would make it easier to program musical things or audio with. And so I used this very old but still quite popular program called Pure Data. And Pure Data is now that I know how to use it inside out, it's so incredibly intuitive, because it's like little boxes of functionality, in the same way that this Little Bits thing has little boxes that you put them side by side. In the Pure Data world, it's just a node-based thing where you drag a cable basically from one box to another box, and then the output from that box goes into the input of the next box. And so you can build these very sophisticated little chains, and that's how you do the programming. So you can make samplers and multi-track recorders. I've made loopers. I've made all kinds of things within this Pure Data environment. And so the cool thing about Raspberry Pi is it can run that without any screen or anything. So it'll run your whole thing. It's like an embedded computing platform, and it comes in a variety of sizes. This is the regular Raspberry Pi. There's the Zero, which is a smaller thing, so you can embed these. I've been embedding them in instruments. So this is one of my daughter's old ukuleles, and I took a Dremel to it, and and then was able to. I'll give you a link, Morton, so you can, like, I have examples of all of these in action.
Yeah.
But basically, so this, like I said, it's a Raspberry Pi that's just got some potentiometers. So these basically these knobs that I can tweak. So this turns this analog ukulele with a little $5 pickup, turns it into basically a synthesizer. Like it sounds. You can still hear that it's a ukulele, but it's sonically, or let's say tonality-wise, really, really different. And I have little recordings of this thing in action on my website on haigarmen.com. So I found it really fun to be making. So I made this instrument that basically also uses a Raspberry Pi. So you can see there's a Raspberry Pi in there, or the battery. And so this thing I call the non-instrument, and I call it the non-instrument because you don't really play it; it plays you. The idea here is that I wanted people to kind of realize that these devices that we have all around us, they talk to each other without us really knowing. So this Raspberry Pi, whenever I turn it on, will scan the kind of Bluetooth universe around it, where as far as it can go, and will pick up any unique identifiers of phones. So it grabs your phone ID. There's a thing called the UID that every phone has that's unique, and it takes that sequence of letters and numbers. I know you're thinking about ethics right now, aren't you?
You know me too well.
This is the point of this little device, is I wanted people to start thinking about their privacy through a little musical instrument. So it takes that unique identifier that's on every phone and converts that set of letters and numbers into a musical melody. And so it's playing my phone right now. And then so if it can take up to about 5 different phone numbers, and it'll add them into the mix, and so you'll hear all of these melodies. So I'll have this in the living room, and the people in my family have started recognizing their phone melody.
Oh wow!
Because it takes something that's sort of an intangible, like hard to remember sequence of letters and numbers, but when you hear it as a melody, it actually becomes quite recognizable, even if it's not super musical. Some of them are more musical than others, but this was just my way of getting people to go, our devices, they're talking to each other.
That's so cool and creepy, but it's like, I mean, it's innocuous. It can't do anything. It doesn't do anything to the devices. It just visual or audiophies it creates an oral language. So
there's a whole area of data sonification. That people take data. They'll take like the movement of a glacier, and they'll play it back as music, like speed it up and play it back, so people can, because our perception of sound is really, really quite intense and accurate. In fact, there's more. We use color for so many things, but there's more colorblind people than there are people that are tone deaf. Yeah.
I remember reading something sometime at some point about a deaf astronomer blind astronomer who was discovering things in the night sky that other astronomers weren't, because she was listening to the night sky. So she wrote an algorithm that would take these, the pictures of just stars, and then somehow transpose them into things. And then she would take pictures on many different days and then listen to changes. And she was able to detect these minute changes that you simply cannot see. And they were also changes that the computer algorithms couldn't quite pick up, because they almost seemed like they were just, slight variations of the same thing, or they could be some sort of, but she was able to detect these. And she would literally sit there for hours just listening to the music of the sky, and pick up on changes in the music over time. Because you're right, that when you somehow the brain is able to map patterns of music very easily.
Yeah, we're trained for that. I mean, it's part of a voice too. Like the language is basically a whole bunch of sounds, and so we're really good at pattern recognition, right?
Yeah. No, it's funny because I'm a bit of an obsessive musician, so I get really frustrated when things aren't, when things are wrong in the music. I tend to describe it as there's something wrong with the shape, right? So I'll listen to music and I'll be like, this version of the song is not as good because the shape is wrong, or I prefer, there's a Britney Spears song of all things where she modulates the song about in the last verse, and the modulated version of the song is where the whole song should be, because the shape is right, and it's not right in the where she starts it is wrong, and then it ends up being right. And I was reading the story. I think it was Edvard Grieg, the Norwegian composer, who would drive his wife crazy by playing his music, and then he would leave the last note, and she would literally run through the house and just bong, hit the last note, because you can't leave things unfinished. And then there are bands now that do this. Well, they'll Sting does it, and other bands sometimes do this, where they'll have an incomplete end to a song. And it drives me insane. It makes me so much, because it's so intentional. But I think that's also purposeful, that that people develop this by listening to a song. As you're listening to it for the first time, your brain maps the pattern of the song. And if it's, sometimes you'll listen to music and you go, this is becoming too repetitive. And it's because it becomes boring because the pattern is too recognizable. And then the musician knows that and will break the pattern on purpose too, right?
Yeah.
And when you, like what you're doing here, where you're taking other things in the world and turning them into music, you're exposing these patterns that we don't see.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting. So if you take that into like a conference where there are hundreds of people, does it pick up all the different people and it just turns into noise?
It only can scan what's in like a 30 foot radius. Because it's
Bluetooth.
Yeah, it uses Bluetooth. So
the old Viking can only reach so far, right?
And I've programmed it to only sequence five patterns. So it'll take 5. But you can get it to scan in the same way that your Wi-Fi can have a list of like 30 things if you want it to. All of these devices, they're trained to like do their handshake. Like they basically want to talk to each other, right? So there's this thing called a handshake, which is like, what's your ID? Oh, yeah. I give you my ID if you tell me your ID. And they exchange really quickly without there being any idea of like privacy or anything. So that, those of us that are now reading all about surveillance capitalism and stuff, we're very worried that we've now made these things too social. These devices, they will exchange information before asking, like who's asking, right? They don't. And so a lot of my like master's students are working on projects that are about helping us understand the implications of that kind of privacy. So this instrument world that I've been working in, it spreads itself across a whole bunch of different areas. It really it forces you to be multidisciplinary in how you approach problem solving. So I really don't feel like I'm even getting, like I know a lot about how to build stuff and prototype and have built many instruments, but I feel like I'm still scratching the surface. That's kind of to me, an indication of a good research area. It's like, I've been working on it for 2 years now, and I'm like, whoa, there's so many directions I can, like there's rabbit holes everywhere. Like there's so many ways that it can go. So it's been really, really fun. I can't wait to, of all the places I've done these sonic interactions workshops, I haven't actually done one in Vancouver, so I'll be doing one in Vancouver. Hopefully as soon as we're able to meet in
when we're allowed to be together again. Yes.
Exactly.
Oh, well, this is fascinating, Haig.
Thanks for having me. I feel like I could go on about this stuff for a long time, but I feel like I've given you a good idea of the area.
Well, I'll just have to have you back at some point, and we'll talk some more and see where your explorations have taken you. If
people have questions, you can ask on LinkedIn or like even on my blog on haigarmen.com. I have like a message thing. I have a sonicinteractions.org website that has got a bunch of the documentation for both the kits that I've built. I've tried to make it as open source as possible. So I have a GitHub repo with all of the code and stuff that helps you build these little instruments. Like basically, if you have a Raspberry Pi, like it really just needs one extra board that sits on top of the Raspberry Pi, and then all of a sudden, you've got this thing that you can make some really great prototypes with. So yeah, there's places you can ask questions if you have questions and want to get into this.
Yeah, and you have an Instagram channel where you play guitar every day too.
I do.
It's like an ongoing guilt trip for me to watch you play guitar. And I'm like, I don't have time.
I started that during the lockdown, and I just have been enjoying it so much. It's like become my daily practice. Like after I finish doing this, I'll be recording my daily little jam that I put out, and it's like it's been a really good discipline for me to like have you tried? Yeah, you do a photo every day.
Yeah,
So if people want to get into anything, I think this do a little bit every day approach is really an amazing way to do it. And like I've been like a musician for most of my life, but I only recently feel like I've been able to play jazz. And so play like jazz is so involved, and yeah, so many things have to be connected, that I was like, the only way I can really do this properly is by doing it every single day, even if that means just like a half hour or an hour. But so now I'm learning one jazz standard every day. And so what you see normally in these Instagram posts, so my Instagram is Haig, just Haig, which so many people want to buy. I don't know. Someone today was like, I'll offer you good money for that Instagram handle. Anyway, so I used to post more things about design, but right now it's almost entirely just me playing like a very quick improvisation, as usually jazz, but sometimes they're like more pop tunes. I think I'm coming up on maybe about 80, 90 now. At this point. Quite a lot.
Yeah, we've been in, I'm also running a journal, like a lockdown journal, and I hit 100 days on Sunday.
Cool.
So yeah, and I started writing it right before the lockdown started in BC. So it was like, I started writing the journal, and then 2 days in or something is like, oh, well, now we're actually in lockdown. So yeah, 80 sounds about right, because it does a couple of weeks, and then you go, I need to do something.
So that stream that I've been posting is not to make you feel guilty, Martin, but to inspire you. And I have noticed some of the people that follow me are like, they're like, now I'm going to play the Bach cello prelude just because Haig did it like last week, and I want to see if I can do it on my flute. And so that's the kind of thing that I'd like to see, is like people also like doing the same thing. There's just so many musical people out there that music is like the thing they used to do, and it's such a amazing release, like a healthy way to get your, like, we're all feeling so much in this time that it's like, to me, it's one way to get some of those, expressing some of those things that are like, could be tension, could be like it's just I like how Radiolab calls it the great pause or something like that. Like it's a chance for us to like look at our lives and go, hey, what are the things that really make us happy? And the thing, for me, one of them is music. I've been like playing music with a bunch of people, some in Vancouver, some outside, like down in Seattle area and everything. So it's been really rewarding in that way, that like music has really brought back so many things, and now having this connection with design has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's being able to connect two things in your life that you are passionate about and making something new out of it is extremely rewarding. And,
it is, for sure,
and also very inspiring. Like, it's just, for me, it's just I have you may have noticed that I have this crazy thing behind me. Like, this is, I'm planning a new course because I have some things that I need to do, right? So it's hard to find the time, but at the same time, every time I pick up a guitar, two things happen. One is that I go, oh, I need to do this more. And the other one is I need to explore music more, because I have software to muck around and I make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
I'm realizing that software doesn't give me the tangibility I need for the music to really happen. Because when I play in a band, I go and like pick at other people's instruments and like poke at things and try to make sounds. But when you're sitting on a computer, even if you have a keyboard attached, it's not the same, because you have to like go onto your mouse and move things around. So there's something about that, just creating music in the real world part. And that's the interaction layer, right?
For sure.
And it just brings home that idea that it has to do with the actual interaction of it and the exploration of it and the randomness of what is produced and the surprise that comes out of like, what if I just plug these things together? Oh, that sounds awful. What if I switch? Like, I just turn the cables around? Oh, now it sounds fantastic. Like, I remember when I got my first wah-wah pedal, right? And then it's the whole thing. You put it either before or after your distortion pedal.
Yeah, changes completely.
You're either distorting the wah, or you're distorting the guitar before it goes to the wah. And the difference between those two effects
Massive.
is two different worlds, right? And then there are situations where you want one or the other. And then I was reading about the guitarist that played with David Bowie, Mick something, and
Ronson.
he was,
Mick Ronson.
Yeah, and I always wondered because he had the strangest sound on his guitar. It was like a squawking duck.
Yeah.
And I watched a documentary, and it's because he would take a Crybaby and he would put it at this weird angle and just leave it. So he was like half wad the sound, and then he played a telly and he just cranked all the bass out of it, so that he had this bizarre sound that is the only way you can emulate it is knowing this. Because if you try to do it in software or try to do it with effects afterwards, it just doesn't work. And it's because he was like, randomly dropped something on the wah and go, well, that's a good sound. It sounds like a choked duck and a trumpet as a guitar. Or have you heard the band Big Country?
Yeah, of course.
Scottish band. And their guitars sound like bagpipes.
Yeah.
And it's like,
they had a whole bunch of
how are you doing this?
Yeah.
I remember, like, I was 12 years old, right? And I was listening to this going, why do your guitars sound like bagpipes? Like, how
they had that song Big Country. Like they had a song that was named after the band.
Yeah, I know. And it's just
a big hit in the 80s.
I know. It's just there's so much of this, and I guarantee that was just them mucking around.
Yeah, for sure.
And be like, oh, wait, it sounds like a bagpipe. We're from Scotland. Let's do this. Right? Well, hey, it was wonderful having you. I really enjoyed this conversation. We'll probably loop around to this at some point in the future. If you're watching this and you go, hey, I have something I want to talk about or show and tell on the show, send me a note. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on the LinkedIn and on YouTube. So you can find me somewhere. So just say, hey, Morten, I want to come and show something on your show, and I'll invite you. And then you can be just like Haig and talk about all sorts of random stuff. So until then, have a great day. And thank you all for watching. Thank you, Haig, for coming. And I'll see you sometime next week.
Take care.